I remember one of my first insights into society was regarding psychosis. I used to experience sleep paralysis on a regular basis. And I also liked drugs, but this is when I was very young. But the sleep paralysis came way, way, way before the drugs. But I figured out that if you go to a doctor and you say specific things about your sleeping patterns, including things like sleep paralysis, then you get certain kinds of medication that, if you're into those types of medication recreationally, it's very good for your objectives. And the doctor used that term. It was the first time I'd ever come across it. I told him that about the experiences that I was having when I was trying to go to sleep, which were true. I didn't make them up. And he told me I had a mild psychosis, and then he gave me the drugs that I wanted. And that's when I realised that at that time, and maybe specifically that doctor, it's not like I'd done a lot of study in the field of medicine then, but I knew that they didn't actually know what they were talking about. To have somebody come to you, this is where my head was at the time, to have somebody come to you and say, okay, I'm having these experiences where I wake up and my body's paralysed, but I'm awake and I can't talk. And I try to move and I can't, and I try to speak and it's just like a whisper. And then sometimes I see figures and have strange feelings and sensations, and there's terror and fear, and sometimes I'm pulled out of my body, and anyway, etc., etc. To mention these incredible and incredibly fascinating phenomena, to then say, you've got a mild psychosis, take these drugs, and that's it, is to totally deny the phenomena. What exactly is going on there? How is it possible for somebody to have these types of experiences? What specifically is happening to that individual if they're no longer in their body and their mind is still active to the point where it is generating new experience? No longer in their body. Mind still active in a sleeping body, generating new experiences. And I didn't get this at the time, but that immediately reveals that the actual entity is the mind. If the body can go to sleep, but the mind continues, and you're in there having that experience, then you're the mind, obviously. You're not the body. Because the body's asleep, but you've just gone somewhere else. So whatever you are in there is not the body. Now, obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but I did know that to believe what the doctor said and to just go along with that as if, oh, okay, mild psychosis, give me the drugs, I'll take the drugs, and I'll never ask any questions ever again. I'll never look into it any more deeply, and I'll just believe there's something wrong with me, was bearing in mind, and this is possibly why it was so easy for me to not play into it, the diagnosis. I had hundreds of these experiences as a child. Essentially, I had so many of them that I knew I knew when they were going to happen. I knew the process. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why it was happening. But it was like turning on a TV. Okay, same show every night. What's that show? Everybody Loves Raymond. Okay, well that's on at this time. South Park, that's on at this time. Sleep paralysis, same time every night, same things going on. And to just immediately give that a label. You've got a mild psychosis. Oh, okay. All right. what does that mean exactly? And of course I didn't ask those questions because I didn't care what this doctor thought. I just wanted the medication because I used to enjoy taking them recreationally. And but anyway, getting back to the question we kind of raised earlier, if you've seen through a lot of this stuff and you know that in most cases, in fact in all cases originally, things like psychosis and so-called mental health disorders are very, 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 very much reflective of spiritual conditions, and not only that, but a kind of rebellion against modern society, as in the spirit here, mind here, having this experience very often does not gel or desire to gel with this insanely corrupt society. And so there is a disharmonious resonance between world, mind, body, and of course then there's a kind of a weird functioning going on, which most people call mental health problems, and then it gets diagnosed by the world, society, which has a very insanely, cruelly limited perception. Most of the time you won't be able to. Sometimes you will, of course. You could have a really, really good conversation. It helps if you know your shit. It also helps if those people are open-minded. It also helps if some of those people perhaps have had mystical experiences, unusual paranormal type experiences. Those people tend to be much more open-minded, but we're evolving, gnarly. Excuse me, I keep burping because I'm drinking a coffee. Some of us are evolving, and what that means is some of us aren't. As the human being evolves, the systems that it has created are old news. Do you understand? You can go your whole life believing something is real, fundamental, important, absolute reality. If you wake up once, all of that's dead. Old news. It's gone. The mind that you had, or rather, let's say, the level of consciousness, if you want to put it that way, the energy that you had that created those systems is no longer there. It's evolved. Usually you're bigger, wider, more awake, and so there's no going back. And so there is no explaining it to anyone below the surface. There's no explaining it, and so you're left with no option but to establish new systems, new institutions, new educations. Just let go. But you tend to have to let go of the people that are also still swimming in the depths of despair with the less evolved views. Okay, you can hang around and try to evolve them, or encourage them to evolve, and be prepared for a long and patient journey. But in most cases, unfortunately, you won't be able to. I was lucky once upon a time that I managed to have a conversation with an Indian doctor who was more, actually it was two Indian doctors, two female Indian doctors, psychiatrists, in the same room at the same time. And I had many fascinating conversations with these doctors. They were all, it wasn't just them two, but there was a couple of more Western doctors, males, females, etc. Anyway, I talked to them about certain types of experiences that I'd had, detaching from the body, experiencing a form of consciousness that was non-physical, mind, related to the mind itself. And I talked about having experiences through different bodies and seeing past lives and things like this. And luckily, well, not necessarily luckily, but I gained an insight that these two Indian doctors said, you know, Western medicine isn't cut out for this sort of language. It's not connected currently to the spiritual dimension. These two Indian doctors were from a yogic background, yoga, Hindu, you know. So they're aware of these types of phenomena from a cultural, maybe I guess you could say a religious standpoint. And so, I mean, that's nice, isn't it? If maybe you get a doctor who's a bit more awake. I didn't care. I don't need somebody else to tell me what I am. I don't need somebody else to give me a label to explain what I'm experiencing. I'm quite happy just having the experience and seeing into it myself and learning from it and gaining insight into it and looking deeply into it. But I understand that that's not how society works. Once you've got those labels on you, and it's, from my experience, it's very, very rare to come across those types of doctors, the ones that are a bit more open-minded. And so many people get consumed and fall into that trap, unfortunately. And that's a real shame, because I can give you, again, specific examples of there are lots of different types of environments in the world. And one environment you go to and you explain yourself, if you want to, those people will have a certain kind of perception of you. Go to a different environment and explain the exact same thing, and those people will have a very different kind of perception of you and a very different view of you. And again and again and again, some of them will be extremely negative, some of them will be extremely positive, some of them might be terrified of what you've just told them, but the other ones weren't. What I'm getting at is, yeah, society, unfortunately, is very, very confused about what's going on and what's really happening, and that's a shame for a lot of the people that get caught up in it and that think there's no other place to turn, that there is no other way. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Gnarly, because one of the psychologists that I spoke to, this was in the same kind of time I was doing the rounds inquiring, and one of the psychologists, who was actually a really nice guy, a bit of a limited perception, but who doesn't in that world, he said, you know, you're trying to live in the West with an Eastern mind, you do realise that. It's like, okay, yeah, that's what's happening.